it's time. It's celebrating. It's 5 years. We're rolling on the road. We're rolling on the road. 100 shades of diversity. We're rolling on the road. Oh, rolling on the road. We're rolling on the road. 100 shades of diversity. We're rolling on the road. Take it away.
Thank you, Cousin Pat, for that wonderful, wonderful intro. And today is Tuesday. And does anybody know the date today? It's May what?
27th.
Wow. It's almost the end of the month, you guys. It's almost June. Today, we're going to do things just a little bit differently. We are talking again on this week about the verdict of Patrick Lyoya. And Dave is going to be a guest and not a host so that he can express himself representing the disability community. We have Miyoshia, who is here, who is definitely a community activist. She ran for Kentwood commissioner. And we have Pastor Daryl Gaddy, who has worked very, very closely with Prosecuting Attorney Becker. Not that he holds his opinion of what Becker did, but giving his insights based off of his personal relationship. He is the pastor of Pilgrim Rest Missionary Baptist Church. Welcome, 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 everyone on today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we'll start with Miyoshia. She connected the family with the interpreter, is why she's here at the table. So if you could talk a little bit about that connection and what happened.
So I didn't exactly connect the family with the interpreter. The interpreter happened to be a friend of mine, Israel. His name is Benjamin. He called me the night of the murder, and he was explaining to me that the family had heard that something had happened to their son. He was at the police department, but they would not let them see him, and they would not tell them what was going on. And he was like, hey, is there something you can do, somebody that you know that could help us? And immediately, the first person that came to mind was Robert S. I'm like, this, I know if somebody's going to get something done, he is going to be the one. And as soon as I called Robert, I'm like, hey, my friends, he's working with the family. Their son was hurt. They're trying to see him. And he was just like, oh my, because I was out of town. I was in Chicago at the time. And I was like, can you help us? And he was like, oh my goodness, yes, we are hearing about everything. And we were trying to find out what was going on. It's perfect. Connect us. And I connected him too. And it was just on from there.
Okay. So that's where the connection is.
Yes.
You making a connection, because we had Robert S. here on last Wednesday, and he credited you for getting everyone connected and making sure that the family had what they needed. One of the things, Dave, do we consider being a refugee as any sort of disability?
No, I mean, it from a disability perspective, as we like to say, there are many different definitions. The ADA talks about, the Americans with Disabilities Act, that you have an impairment that significantly limits a major life activity. So the impairment, if you have a cognitive deficit and can't understand, what's being communicated because of a mental health condition or an emotional impairment, that is a disability. I would say that Patrick's inability to fully understand the commands from the officer were language barriers. So they're not disabilities, but they are very real barriers.
I think one of the things that continually happens is that they call them immigrants, but they're not immigrants. They are refugees. And there's a definite difference between being an immigrant and being a refugee. So they came from a war-torn country seeking, asylum here. That is some sort of dis, maybe not ability dis, but of the 1,683 disses, there's definitely a lot of dis that we can attach, to this. Pastor Gaddy, as far as him understanding the commands, I think there's a lot. I'm going to get back to you. I think there's a lot of anguish within the community as it relates to how the commands were given and how he responded.
Yes, and I would say, Dr. Barrington, that I think that a lot of the anguish and a lot of the anxiety is created because of the contempt that was in the engagement from the start. Whether the entire situation was necessitated because it was only a traffic stop. And so when we get to the point of whether or not he understood the commands, I think there is a lot of anxiety around the fact of whether the officer executed the process in a way that it could be understood from the onset, and then de-escalation rather than escalating it, even in spite of Patrick trying to run or whatever his response to the stop was. The officer had the responsibility, I believe, to de-escalate. So the anxiety, I think, comes not in necessarily the understanding of the commands, but in the processes of following the process that and the training that he was given.
Miosha?
I was going to say that I believe that disability and diversity kind of go hand in hand when you think about it. And when you talk about all the disses and we think about disadvantages, we have the language barrier going on. We have cultural barriers going on. We have an officer who's kind of known for, I want to use the word harassment, or he's known for basically picking with people in that area. I just think this time you get the right combination together and you have things that happen like this happens, where everybody else might be used to that. Nobody is really used to that. And I think the amount of force that was used when you have somebody that has a language barrier, comes from a war-torn country, it's just like it's a recipe for disaster. He's at a disadvantage, and man, things just got out of hand and it turns into something like this where it did not have to happen that way. And it's just unfortunate. It's so sad.
We want to say thank you to Dr. V for tuning in all the way from Detroit, Michigan. You got a homie here. Pastor Daryl is from the Detroit area. She says, great day, everyone. Dave, your thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely would build on what Pastor Gaddy was saying about the current state of the de-escalation training that the police are undergoing. To, a small bit of credit to the sheriff and various police departments in the community, that they are working alongside mental health professionals, so that if they come upon an incident, is it really a law enforcement situation or is it a mental health crisis or a mental health incident? And so I'm forgetting the name in the city of Grand Rapids, but it is, there are trained social workers, again, to help de-escalate those situations. And so how is that happening more and more and constantly? Police officers have to to say consistently and with regularity do firearms training, and what are their reactions. So if they are in a active crime situation where the perpetrators are armed, they do that training. Well, are they as serious with the de-escalation? That's a question. As you all know, we had scheduled a coffee hour with both the chief of Grand Rapids Police Department and the Kent County Sheriff to talk about disability in law enforcement. We postponed that because it was during the time of the jury deliberation. We just didn't want to tangle it all up. So we will be rescheduling that and asking those questions, because it is, the stories that occur. I mean, and stories, people telling their truth, where officers are not working to de-escalate a situation. They're adding to it, which then doesn't help anybody in that situation. I mean, here it was the extreme, the extreme consequences where a person died.
Well, will that meeting be held at the Inclusion Center?
No, I mean, we originally had it scheduled at United Methodist Community House, so we would be more centrally located. So we'll continue to look for a more centrally located spot.
Pastor Gaddy?
Yeah, well, depending on when the calendar says, Dave, I didn't know if you know, but we're doing a full renovation here, so we want a beautiful community space.
Yep, somebody told me that. I can't remember who.
Last August, Pilgrim Rest, the Rest as they are affectionately called within the community, held, what do you want to say, a rally on a Saturday? I don't think you want to call it that, but where the police department comes out and they go hand in hand. Is it partner with the community or with the church?
Yes, and it was a part of the National Faith in Blue initiative, where we partnered with our local law enforcement organizations, our sheriff's department, prosecutor's office, police department, and just being able to, first of all, work hand in hand with our community, the faith community at large, and our law enforcement community to allow space for individuals to get to know one another, provide resources across the community, and to build a bridge with our law enforcement community.
Will you do that again this year?
Yes, we are looking at October is the National Faith in Blue Week, and we will again engage in a variety of events across the city. Last year, we were able to do a basketball game with the SWAT team, the special response team, and our juveniles that are in our programming. Those young people who are being waived as adults, but yet they're coming into our program to avoid the waiver. And then on Saturday is when we did the resource fair with our law enforcement officers. On Sunday, we had a worship gathering where we prayed for and on behalf of our first responders, our law enforcement, and our municipal leaders. And then on Monday was the Faith in Blue luncheon, where we talked about having one vision and one voice across the community.
How do we get that messaging out? Do you think that what happened on that weekend last year, people have forgotten already during this mistrial? I mean, how do you translate what you guys did then to remember that everyone is not bad? Everyone is not out there being a bully, as this young man has been called as a police officer. But how does this last throughout the year so that the community is able to accept when something like this happens?
Yeah, Kim, there has to be some specific and very intentional efforts that are ongoing across the community, from not only faith leaders, but our municipal leaders, our community leaders, those who have, shall I say, the opportunity to engage different communities of people. And the intentionality has to be focused around letting officers see that people are human and people make mistakes and people are to be valued and respected. And then there is also room for the local residents of a community to understand that the police officers have a job to do. And so what does that engagement look like? And those of us who sit in the chairs of leadership have the responsibility and obligation. We're accountable for helping to build those bridges, for helping to create that dialogue, and to even do some training so that people know how to engage with police in a way that the reality is police officers want to go home at night, and our loved ones want to come home at night as well. And so how do we create amicable even traffic stops that will lead to, if it's a ticket, it's a ticket. If it's an arrest, it's an arrest, but it should not end in death. And so we have some very specific and intentional things that we must do as a community, a greater community at large, to see to it that we're serving the people who may not understand that, who may not have those skill sets, and who may only see one another as enemies or victims and not as real people.
There's a lot of other programs too, and I'm so glad of the work that Pastor Gaddy and you, Dr. Kimberly, and Dave, that you all are doing to bring everybody together. Jennifer Franson has an organization that brings cops and communities together. It's called ICI Nation, and they get together and do a lot of community events at the Grand Rapids Police Station and everywhere else. She's always going around to different police stations, handing out awards, finding out what's going on and how they can help. Uptown Church, Pastor Greg Umunga, they have a unity and community walk. They have fishing with the popo. I was blessed to go last year and watch the police officers come together with young men and go fishing, and they gave away free tackle boxes and showed the young men how to fish, and they all got out on the boats. And then when they do this community walk, they actually walk within, like, I think it's over a mile radius around different areas, hand in hand with the community, just praying. And it's awesome to see that. It's awesome to see the police chief out. So there's plenty of things that are going on. We just always have to continue to find more ways to reach out, because it's scary. I have a 14-year-old. She used to be frightened to death of police officers. And I had to make an effort to take my daughter to the Kentwood police station to have her meet with some of the female officers who kind of sat down with her. The captain over there, they kind of sat down with her, talked with her, and was like, hey, if you ever need anything, you come and you let me know. It changed the way my daughter even decided. She said, when I graduate, I want to be, what does she want to be? A criminal psychologist. All because of that interaction. So we as a community have a responsibility as well to make sure that we reach a hand out to get to know officers too, because there is a lot of tension and things like, what happened. We got to do our best to make sure it doesn't happen again, because everybody is impacted.
That's right.
So as far as some of the buzz that said that Becker could have chosen more than one choice as far as what to charge the officer with, and that's why there was a hung jury, because they didn't have any other choices. What do you feel about that, Dave?
I mean, to say first and foremost, I might be an attorney, but I'm not a trial attorney. I'm not a prosecutor. And so I don't understand all of that. However, oftentimes when somebody is charged, and again, this is based on reading, not real world experience, that a prosecutor might, in a charging document, throw the proverbial kitchen sink at somebody, hoping that it'll scare that person and they'll take a plea to a lesser. The vast majority, and I think it's like 96% of criminal charges actually are resolved in a plea deal. Very, very few go to trial. And so again, this situation where, and without sounding too lawyerly, it is very clear that the officer killed Patrick. So there was a killing. And as the prosecutor has said, at least on the media that I've heard, that half of the community is telling him it's a justified killing, and half of the people are calling him and telling him it's unjustified. And so So then it's back to what are the levels of unjustified killing? There's definitely, the second-degree murder that he was charged with. And then there's manslaughter, both voluntary and involuntary. So unfortunately, when somebody causes a car crash due to alcohol use, they'll be charged with, I believe, some level of manslaughter and will face jail time for that. There's no excuse to say, well, I was intoxicated, what have you. So anyways, I mean, I just do believe if there was a lesser charge, but I don't understand the calculus that goes into this for a prosecutor, and to, as you were alluding to give the jury a choice to say, well, we don't believe it was second-degree murder, which I believe, the punishment can be as severe as life in prison without parole, but to have a lesser crime, and he would at least serve some time for this killing, as opposed to right now it's that it was this or nothing, and right now the prosecutor has stated that he's pretty certain he can't get this, so there won't be a retrial.
We have a comment from our audience, and it says, Chris Becker has shown us that cops can get away with murder, and if this would have been an African-American cop, he never would have walked out of that court. Your thoughts, Pastor Darrell?
Well, I think it's fair to say that we really don't know how it would have turned out in either way, whether it had been an African American officer, because we did just see a case where 3 African American officers were indicted and tried to be prosecuted for the beating of a person they stopped, and they all got off the hook, right? So we can't just put it on race. But I will say that we don't know the reasons why Chris Becker did not charge the second time, did not take it again to trial. There could have been some fiscal financial reasons. There could have been social and relational reasons. We don't know, but what we do know is what he said. And I will say this. I sit on both sides of the fence. I don't at all condone the killing of a pedestrian or anyone by a police officer, especially in a case like this when you're on the man's back and you shoot him in the back of the head. That to me is the epitome of non-threatening. But I will also say that as a pastor and as a father and as a community advocate, that we have to do a better job with our children, with our sons, in our engagements. So does that mean that we alleviate and we allow it? Absolutely not. But I will say that after knowing Chris Becker and after serving with him with the programming with these young people, he has shown a heart that he does not desire to lock our young men away, that he has called us and referred us to some of the worst juvenile offenders in the county, and that he has given a second chance of grace to young men who, after 4 and 5 and 6 different cases in the juvenile court and very high-level crimes, that they should be in Jackson or Ionia under any other circumstance, than rather he referred them out of the system and into a program. So I can see where I sometimes would say, man, I wish he would have charged again. And then there are times when I say, how would it have come out, considering the political climate that we're in, considering the racial and ethnic makeup of the county, in terms of jury selection. So there's so many variables. I don't think that any of us could come to a dead set, this would have happened or should have happened, other than to say maybe charging may have given another result had it been done. And so I'm a fighter. I'm a little bit of a radical, and I would have said, take it as far as we could go with it, and if we lose, we lose.
Well, Yoshia, there is floating around that they're going to ask the Attorney General, as a matter of fact, the Urban League president and our NAAC president, Clee Jackson, are asking Dana Nessel to please try the case again?
I think that the case should be tried again. It's just unfortunate because when we think about it, we talk about, justification. Does the crime fit the punishment? Was there really a crime to make somebody do something as heinous as what happened? Even if he said he thought it was his taser, what would make you taser someone in the back of the head? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And we have to think there's a jury that made a decision. They made a decision, and we can talk about the law and all those things, but at the end of the day, they went and they made a decision. And somewhere along the way, they said what happened was okay. That is where I see a problem at. Just from a ministry standpoint, where are the hearts of people? Where we think something like that is okay, whether he was an officer or just a regular civilian. That's the issue that I have, the hearts of people, because you can try something all day, but if the hearts of the people don't change, right, we'll turn around again. And no matter how many charges are there, the jury will come out the same way until the hearts of the people change, because people change laws, right? And I don't think anybody is really like realizing that someone will use what happened for another case when it happens again and another person is shot in the back or the back of the head. When does it stop? When do we stop and just take a look at our hearts and say, we have to do better?
Right.
That's
I think
the part
that
gets to me so.
And I definitely understand and can empathize with that. That's exactly what Robert S. said, or Robert Womack, County Commissioner, was making those same comments. And it's just terrible that Dave and I have been on for 5 years. This is our 5th year of doing the show. And let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the 3rd or 4th show in, we had Robert S. for the 5th year. And when we first started 5 years ago, we were at this same place, but it was with George Floyd. And we had on Robert S. and we could barely get through the show because it was so emotional. I mean, he cried, we all cried. I mean, just to hear his heart as a Black man, not even as an elected official, but how he felt as a Black man in that moment. To truly share his heart. Dave?
Yeah, definitely, as we've discussed, that was a very powerful witness by Robert. It is to ask the question, when do things change?
Because that was 5 years ago.
Well,
Dave,
right. Well,
shortly after. So this young he knows about what happened with George Floyd. He knows that George Floyd did everything that he was supposed to do, and his life was still taken. This is running through that man's mind. Everything that he went through in Africa, a war-torn country that he had come from. Then he comes here and he sees this Black man who complied, did everything he was supposed to do, and he still got killed. And now here comes this officer trying to taser him over a license plate. So in his mind, he's thinking about all these things. That is a lot. It happened shortly after that. It seems like it was just yesterday because the case, we're just finally coming to a conclusion of the case. But this happened right shortly after George Floyd. That is a lot to be on someone's mind. Could you imagine that? I do everything I'm supposed to do, and you still kill me and kill me slowly?
Pastor Darrell?
Yeah, it's a heavy burden. And it is clearly heart-wrenching to think about what was going through his mind at that moment over a traffic stop. And I can literally say that I have been treated pretty rough by some officers who had no reason and no cause at all to inflict the victimization upon me that they were trying to inflict because of who I was, because of my color, because of the community I was driving in. It was totally unfair. And as Miosha said, until we change the heart and the mind of the people who are doing the policing, until we get the training tactics and the accountability in our policing system, because, from slave patrols to now, not much has changed. When you think about the fact that black men continue to be viewed as criminals without any engagement whatsoever, we are profiled from the time that they lay eyes on us to the time that the engagement is over. And whatever happens, happens based upon the feeling of that individual officer and then the excuse they choose to use in the face of their assault up on an individual who were minding their business in the first place. And the question is as has been said, is an invalid license plate enough to lose your life over? And to be treated upon and to be acted upon in such a manner that it creates an escalation that you're trying to now defend yourself from an officer who claims that he was trying to defend himself, who comes to the engagement with the power of the law and the badge and the gun. And so where is the real defense happening in this situation? And so that's where my angst is, and that's where my voice is when I radically cry out and work with our policing community. But as we've said, I think that it's going to cause us to become more active, not after a shooting, not after a killing, but all times we need to be engaged with our policing community, holding them accountable and not allowing them to wait until another incident happens that we want to get loud and begin to cry out. It's got to be relationship building. It's got to be requirements, laws, and regulations in place, and then we have to follow up to make sure they're following them. And so we really have to do better as a community of leaders to hold them accountable before the killings happen.
We have a comment. Miosha, if you can read it for me, I greatly appreciate it.
It says it definitely is about race for even the African American cops were charged because they were guilty. The same effect should have occurred in this case as a community activist. Someone laying on their stomach's execution style is modern day lynching. We as a community cannot even trust the cops to protect and serve, for it is easier for them to branch together for their colleagues. Yeah. And that speaks to what the pastor was saying about they come with the power of the law. They come with the power of the law.
You want to read this comment, Dave?
Sure. The Grand Rapids Police Department's manual of training booklet must be released and provided to the public.
I agree.
Yeah, I'm surprised it didn't get released as part of the trial, because that seems to have been the issue that, the jury was split on. Was he acting according to his training and acted appropriately according to his training in this situation? And so, there was, if I remember correctly, the six defense witnesses, excuse me, that said that he acted within his training and appropriately. Wow. And so to really, as a community, judge that, and as Pastor Gaddy said, we're looking at that training and how are we within that relationship saying, these rules are what gets us in trouble, because the rules are defined in violence and escalation. I mean, or are they truly in de-escalation?
Mm-hmm. Pastor Gaddy, what happened? I want him to read the next one. Miosha, can you read this one?
It says, and this is from Christian Spicer, it says, the city of Grand Rapids can put the GRPD manual of training on the city website. They sure can, and they should. I think our police chief has been very open. I think good change is coming. All I can say is so unfortunate, but this is one thing that I do know from a spiritual standpoint. I don't care what man's court says. God has one. He serves a higher court than any man's court. And every time that officer goes to sleep, he's going to remember the face of that young man, and he's going to remember the back of his head. So that's where the real punishment comes into play. And no jail can even touch what that feeling is like for him. There has to be a true repentance that comes from him. They can say he's freed all day. Our laws in America have for centuries said that people who did heinous crimes, unjust things, were okay in what they did. And because they had the law to justify, they felt like it was okay. But there's a higher court, and he'll have to answer to it.
Dave, your thought. Look, Pastor Dave, your thoughts?
Pastor Dave.
Well, I mean, it's the how to say it, that not to change the subject, but to say that higher subject where coincidentally today there's a guy named Seth Godin who does marketing stuff. And his quote today is, "We notice the current most when we're headed against it. It's easy to take our advantage for granted when we're headed the other way and it's helping us." And so, I mean, to translate that within race relations in the United States and this massive shift that's occurred, I would label it as negative over the last 3 months, that somehow like any kind of accommodation for people with disabilities is getting something extra. And somehow, all DEIA programs are discrimination against white folks. And then the audacity of, the current administration to declare these white folks from South Africa as refugees, and then showing pictures of a different country as evidence for this, labeled white genocide, and this thing called the replacement theory, that people are allowed to pour in from the southern border so as to replace white folks. It's just like, the flow and trying to convince people that, you two are the ones who are making life bad for me, the white guy. And so it's like, where's all this coming from? And it's only good, I see it making things worse, where our people who were getting a lot of the flow and going with the current and getting all kinds of advantages now are finding things harder. I mean, that was the message, that a lot of the good paying jobs are gone. So we're going to blame China, and somehow we're going to magically bring them back to America. And it's like, unfortunately, hate sells way too easy. And so what really is this piece within the, within the community, that we're having these conversations, and as Pastor Gaddy said, building on relationships, but how difficult, and at some level, not just only difficult, but it's like, really, we've only gotten this far, and we're now feeling like 1 or 2 steps forward, and now we've just taken 4 or 5 back. So it's that little tirade to say, folks, do you really? Yeah, I don't get it. I just don't. People are regurgitating straight up lies, and I don't know how it's going to serve us, the greater Grand Rapids community, let alone the nation or the world, that we continue to just sell hate and blame other people, and it just seems like people are then still sneaking the dollars out the back door. So,
well, we have a comment. First of all, I'm honored and I am blown away that Maurice Barnes is watching. I don't know if he remembers me, but he used to come to the house all of the time, and I remember him being in his uniform. He says, I'm Maurice Barnes, former GRPD police officer, 1977 to 1991. In 1982, I testified against the city of Grand Rapids, the police chief, and 2 police officers in a federal brutality case. Judge Richard E. out of Kalamazoo, Michigan, in the adjudication, made it mandatory that training was a part. Wait a minute, here we go. Wait a minute, because there's another coming on top. He says, in the adjudication, mandatory training was part of the judge's orders. Another comment, a police officer must identify the subject possibility of hit and the backdrop prior to discharging his firearm. I'm going to put this up because maybe I'm not reading it well. Okay. You want to take a run at it? Yeah.
You want me to read it? A police officer must identify the subject possibly of hit and the backdrop prior to discharging his firearm. Sure, or SCHURR states under oath he didn't see where he placed his gun prior to shooting Patrick.
Oh,
sure. Is that how you say his name? Sure. States under oath he didn't see where he placed his gun prior to shooting Patrick. Why would he have his gun out at all?
Hold on. We got another comment.
We must change the culture of the Grand Rapids Police Department. Yeah.
We have another comment from Jeff Smith. This one is pretty. He says, this is in response to the Mayor LeGrand and to the city manager, Mr. Washington. He says, in the end, there cannot be meaningful outcomes of equity and justice in Grand Rapids as long as city leaders continue to pander to the members of the capitalist class, continue to fund developers and the GRPD, ignore demands from the undocumented immigrant community, and remain complicit in the repression of those involved in movement work in recent years. Dave, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's very true. You know, the system is built on protecting those who have and getting more. I mean, we couldn't have more blatant example of that than what got voted out of the Federal House of Representatives last week. Was it Thursday morning? That, you know, close to $1 trillion in cuts to Medicaid and supplemental nutrition programs. They used to be called food stamps. $1 trillion so as to allegedly afford close to over $3 trillion in tax cuts. Most of that going to people making over $1 million. So, I mean, the system is cooked. And then it's more and more, you know, we can't afford housing supports, but we're going to find $600 million in tax cuts for, you know, a generational project downtown Grand Rapids. So it's like, where are our values? How are we leading with our values? And calling the, you know, the deep rootedness of our system, calling it into question.
We have another comment. And I can't attest to this. Again, this is this person's comment. And they say the manual gives the police the authority to murder, not protect and serve the community, which is the intent of giving police officers the use of lethal, deadly force. I think that maybe it could be interpreted that way, but I have not heard anyone state, not from the police department, stating that the manual gives the police the authority to murder.
Unfortunately, when you allow things like this to happen and you tell them that, oh, it was justified what you did, that is in fact giving permission to murder. And that is where laws have to change. And that is where the people need to stand up and fight. Because guess what? Police officers are supposed to be here to protect and to serve us. We pay them. Somewhere the lines have gotten blurred, and we think that the money is coming from somewhere else. The money comes from the people. And with any job, if your boss is paying you, you don't go into your job and slap your boss. You just don't do that because you understand there's a consequence. You will be fired. For some odd reason, things are twisted when it comes to police departments nowadays. Now I'm paying you, and it's okay for you to kill me. It's okay for you to rough me up. It's okay for you to talk to me any kind of way because you have a badge. And you say, well, I'm going through a lot of mental health stress because of my job. Well, guess what? People are going through stress and mental health issues too, especially when I know that because you're having a bad day, you can hurt me and get away with it. That's stress within itself. Being Black inside of America, or being a person in color inside of America, and knowing at any moment a cop can come because they're having a bad day, or there's a misunderstanding, or they accidentally pull out the wrong weapon and kill me, they can get away with it. That is stressful. Like, when does that change? I think that more people need to begin standing up. We need to participate in these elections, not only the global elections, or the elections around the country, like the president. We need to start participating in local elections. We need to see who we are putting in place. We have a lot to do with what goes on. Our votes do matter. Our voices do matter. But if we get upset and then we decide that we don't want to get involved, what happens is these things continue to happen. We have to get to a point as a people where we begin to stand up. We need to start going to these trials and find out what's going on. We need to start holding our politicians accountable and saying, hey, what are you doing about it? Because there's a lot of people, Dr. Kim, that don't know that the verdict is even out. There's a lot of people inside of the African community that don't even know that the verdict is out. Why? Why is it so quick that we can turn around and we can put somebody in jail for a crime that they do against an officer or against someone else, but it takes forever to hold an officer accountable for something that he does to somebody? It feels like they're almost keeping everything hushed to hope that people will forget about it, and then slide everything through the back door because nobody wants any problems. Well, we should be thinking about the problems that'll be caused before we have cops that turn around and do the things that they do. If you feel like it's a stressful job and you can't handle it, find another job, because people's lives are at stake. That's important for everybody. If you cannot do it, then do not do it. There's a bunch of people out here that would love to be a police officer.
We got a couple of comments. Whoa. It says the police department has a value culture of aggressively forcing physical contact towards citizens. And the second one is, the sister just eloquently explained the temperature of police serving in the Grand Rapids Police Department. Dave, respond to the culture. Do you think that that is the culture of the police department?
Well, I mean, I don't know if that's the culture. I mean, to say, whatever, I don't have that opportunity. I don't say opportunity, but the as a white guy of privilege, I don't get randomly stopped and things like that. I won't tell, semi-funny stories. I don't want to make light of this at all. The question, though, is the community. We can ask the chief and the city manager, how are you measuring that culture? How are you that, as a few of the comments have been made today, that the community, and particularly the African-American community, feels that? And how do we address that feeling? Again, Pastor Gaddy gave us, and we know he's working on that and building those relationships. But how are they measuring culture? How are they trying to truly say these are our values, and escalating violence is not a value? How are you practiced in de-escalating? Those are things I believe we can measure. Those are questions we have to be asking. As the officer whose name I can't remember, he typed it earlier. yes, to really review
Maurice
that.
Barnes.
Okay, Mr. Barnes, former Officer Barnes, to really look at that training manual and find out how people are measured. As others say often, if it's measured, it will get done. And if you're not measuring culture, it's not getting done. And it is all of those microaggressions that happen or don't happen, and what kind of bias. And then, as I said, a few moments ago, people are calling into question, well, implicit bias. That doesn't, it's like, no, implicit bias is extremely real. I believe it is. I've seen it happen. I've experienced it in myself with others. And so that idea of how does that lead to those terrible situations when power imbalance, as Miyoshi has already stated, what an officer who has the power in those circumstances, how are they using that power? And even, are they explicit? Are they implicit? But all of that stuff we can measure, and we need to be measuring. And then as a community, we can decide if we support the current culture or we need to continue to work on the change of the culture of the police department.
Dr. Kimberly.
Give me 1 second. We have approximately 7 minutes until the end of the show. I am thankful. I'm grateful. Pastor Darrell looks like was having some issues, technology issues. Yay, it's not just us. No, it happens to everybody. Yes. And all of the persons who have been on here today, there are more than 100 viewers on. I couldn't get to all the comments. I could not get to, all of your names, but I definitely want to say thank you for voicing your opinion. Please keep. Okay, he says he's back, but I don't see him. Okay, don't see him. Pastor Gaddy just sent a message saying that he was back, but okay, he's not there. Wow. Whoa. We've got this a final comment. Well, we've shared everything else. I'm going to put this up here, and Miyoshi, you want to read it?
It says FOP number 97 sent a letter to Prosecutor Becker congratulating him on not retrying Sher. The state majority leader sent Prosecutor Becker congratulations. How should we as a community feel that our government approved this murder?
Dave, does that seem like that's an approval to you?
Say that again?
Does that sound like an approval to you?
Yeah, I would say it does. If they're saying thank you for not retrying this person, why, definitely to get the full context of the letter and to see those letters. Because they were sent to the prosecutor, we should be able to ask under the Freedom of Information Act to get a copy of them. So again, was it saying thank you because this is only going to continue to split the community and we need to move on to healing? Even that is going to ring extremely hollow to the African American community. Or we can't read between the lines at the moment what these folks said, but we need to see it full comment. And then, at least when it comes to the I believe it was the Speaker of the House, the state majority leader is actually Senator Winnie Brinks in the Senate. So I think it was the Speaker of the House, Matt Hall. But again, that's a conjecture, not a fact. But that we need to see that, and then his voters need to determine if they support this guy or not. As Miocha said earlier, it's about getting out and voting. It's asking all candidates, how they support what you believe in. That's just active citizenship. That's not a partisan plea on my part at this point. So anyways, it is, let's really see what people are saying, because then that's going to help us back to how do we measure culture. If folks are congratulating the prosecutor, and if they said, because this police officer shouldn't have been tried in the first place or whatever, then it's telling us we have that culture of violence. And as people have said, police officers can do almost what they want. So again, how are we measuring culture? What are these fuller facts behind these letters of congratulations?
Vertaji says processing. Vertaji, doctor, I agree. I'm really having to process all of this. On tomorrow is going to be another community discussion with the possibility that the family will get to come on. I did speak to Robert this morning, and he had already talked to the family, and the family would love to come on Rolling on the Road. But again, because of language barrier, they only wanted maybe about 10 or 15 minutes. So we can still continue, these conversations. Hopefully maybe former officer Maurice Barnes could give us some kind of insight. Was it different back when he served, or have things, changed drastically since the time that he has retired from the force? So I will get in touch with him after the show to see how much has really changed, especially when he said he was able to testify, against them. And then it was supposed to be added to the training manual. Now, if he was bold enough to do that, how many of us know that it's always, protect our boys in blue, the good old boys club. And here it is, a Black man stood up against some white police officers and testified. So that's something that we really need to, explore. And whatever worked back then, let's ask him and come to the forefront. Let's see if we can't use some of that right now. I mean, whatever works. Let's not try to reinvent the wheel. Miocha, I will give you the last word as we close out on today.
I'd like to end with a poem that I wrote for Lyoya's mom after the murder of her son, and I pasted it on Facebook, but I would love to read this if it's okay.
Yes.
Son, it's called Son. Son, can you hear your mother crying from way across the shore? Son, can you hear her anguished heartache, a sound like none before? Brother, where did your mind drift before your father's call? Son, did you think of home, a future, or have no thoughts at all? Father, you see your people coming from each and every way. Do you see ancestors praising, waiting for this day? Can you feel the pressure rising, aching for release? Father, we hear a war cry sounding, screaming words of peace. Don't you know a new day's coming, carried by the winds, when sorrowed heads start bowing, repenting, breaking in lament? No, you never saw it coming, but our Father knew who would lead the new day coming and why he called on you. Never was your life in vain because it means so much. Some thought no one would notice, but we've all been touched. Son, can't you see your mother crying? Her tears dried in the wind. Oh, but can't she see your Savior coming, so no tears will come again? Feel Anye. Can't you see your children's pain or hear your father's deep sigh? You answered, your head was turned toward a new day to usher in the light. Amen. We've all been touched by the case of Patrick Lyoya, and change is coming. It has to.